Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Today on the newscast, is Iran much closer to a nuclear bomb than previously thought? Some very dangerous developments on that front. Plus, how you can invest in Israel's future. Get all the breaking details coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Starting today, Thursday, September 10th, the Iranian regime is conducting a 3-day massive military exercise maneuvers in the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Iranian Army, Navy will be involved. They'll be launching surface-to-surface missiles and other advanced weaponry. And folks, this is really a message from the Iranian regime to the world that they are on war footing. And part of that war footing, by the way, is Iran's nuclear weapons program. We've got some very important breaking developments on that front that we will share with you in a minute. Before I get to it, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, we are fast approaching 100,000 subscribers. We're excited about that, to reach more people around the world with this crucial message that you're just not hearing anywhere else, certainly not in the mainstream media. So help us get to 100,000. Tell your friends, your family members, your neighbors, and your coworkers to subscribe for such a time as this. And what times we are living in, let's get into it. Iran's nuclear weapons program. At the same time as we have news that Iran is again conducting these massive military exercises, flexing its muscle and its new weaponry in the Strait of Hormuz, we are also hearing that Iran's nuclear weapons program, in particular its enrichment of uranium, that vital component to build a nuclear bomb, is much further along than previously thought. Number one, the Iranian regime announced this week, and you may not have heard about this in the mainstream media, sadly, but it's a major story. They announced that they are building a new uranium enrichment processing facility near Natanz. Now, if you remember, and you can check out our archives here on the Watchman News channel, we talked about this wave of attacks, mysterious attacks, espionage against Iran's major nuclear weapons sites and their missile development facilities over the entire summer, really, of 2020. Natanz was the big one. It was basically shut down. It was crippled. There was a major explosion there. And folks, that was very important because that Natanz facility was crucial in Iran's drive for the bomb. It was Iran's main uranium enrichment processing facility, centrifuge facility. That was basically taken offline by this explosion. But the Iranian regime, again, they are not dissuaded from their ultimate goal. They have their eyes on the prize still of acquiring a nuclear bomb. This is not for peaceful purposes, despite what the regime says. And now they are looking to replace that Natanz facility with a brand new facility. That's number one, folks. And that should tell you, again, Iran is not getting the memo. When the West, when the UN say, hey, Iran, you shouldn't develop nuclear weapons, the Iranian regime doesn't really care what we think. They have an ideological goal of destroying the state of Israel and, yes, destroying the United States of America. I believe what they say when they say death to Israel and death to America. And a nuclear weapons program and developing the world's deadliest weapons is a crucial component to making their radical ideological goal, apocalyptic goal, a reality. Folks, something to remember about Iran's leadership. They really mean what they say, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. If the 20th century, the century of Mao, Hitler, Stalin, and Saddam taught us anything, it's that when evil men tell you they want to kill you, you should take them very seriously. You should listen to them and prepare accordingly. The mullahs in Iran have been telling us for years that, yes, they intend to wipe the world's one and only Jewish state off the map. And by the way, they regard the country that I'm standing in right now, the United States, as, quote, the great Satan. So we need to take them very seriously. This is a regime that has little to no regard for human life and has shown historically no hesitation in sacrificing its own people to meet its wicked ideological ends. Along those lines, we've got the new processing facility going online to enrich uranium. And speaking of enriched uranium, number two, the other big development, the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog. Now, historically, they're not known for being very tough on Iran as it drives for the bomb. But even the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, is sounding an alarm. And they are saying that Iran is enriching uranium at 10 times the accepted level under the guidelines of that 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA for short. We'll just call it the Iran nuclear deal. And you know it's a disaster. We've told you this many times here on the newscast. Under that 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which thank God as an American, President Trump has pulled the United States out of, under that deal, which Europe is clinging desperately to, Iran could only develop or enrich a certain amount of uranium. And now the IAEA is saying they're enriching 10 times the amount that was permitted under this deal. Folks, am I the only one out there who's not a bit surprised by this? Who would have thought that the Iranian regime would be dishonest? I'm shocked. But that's what's going on right now, enriching uranium at a rapid pace, building new facilities to do just that. And more news for you. I'll go to my laptop here. Another interesting report from, let's see, the Institute for Science and International Security. Now, this is a very well-respected nonprofit that focuses on nuclear weapons proliferation, keeps a close eye on what regimes like Iran and North Korea are doing, their illicit nuclear activities. Here's what they say. And folks, this is really sounding the alarm. And this is, again, a nonpartisan. They don't have a dog in this hunt other than they don't want to see rogue regimes get the bomb. Here's what the Institute for Science and International Security said in this recent report. Iran's estimated breakout time on the path to a nuclear bomb. Iran's estimated breakout time as of late September 2020 is as short as 3.5 months. 3.5 months away from getting the bomb. It goes on to say in this report, a new development is that Iran may have enough low-enriched uranium to produce enough weapon-grade uranium, key term there, peaceful program. Why the weapon-grade uranium? For a second nuclear weapon, where the second one could be produced more quickly than the first, requiring in total as little as 5.5 months to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for two, count them, two nuclear weapons. 5.5 months, I don't know, early 2021. Folks, world, I should say, this is a wake-up call, and it's a collision course. We've talked about the collision course between Israel and the Iranian regime in Syria at Israel's doorstep, where Iran says, we're here to stay. We're going to build a base essentially on the Golan Heights from which we can fire rockets and missiles at you, Israel, and duplicate what we've done in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah. And Israel responds by saying, no way, red line. Same deal here. You know, several years ago, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, you remember him, the former president of Iran? He said that Iran's nuclear program is, quote, like a train with no brakes. He's saying, and the Iranian regime is saying, the train has left the station. We're going to develop the bomb. We are going to continue enriching uranium at high levels and driving for a nuclear bomb, whether you like it or not, Israel, whether you like it or not, West or world. That's what they are saying. And Israel responds by saying, no way. We will not allow a regime that is committed to our destruction and that is actively taking steps to make our destruction a reality, whether it's in Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and beyond. The Iranian regime quite clearly is trying to encircle Israel and make those dreams of pushing the Jewish state into the sea a reality. So Israel says, we know what you want to do. We know you mean what you say. And isn't that refreshing, by the way, in the age of many Western leaders who ignore the reality in front of their face and would rather appease and kind of push it away? See Europe as an example. Isn't it refreshing that Israel's leaders across the ideological spectrum, by the way, all have the same response to the Iranian regime. We know what you're up to. We know that you're developing the bomb. We're trying to develop the bomb. We know that you will use it, and we will not allow it. We will not allow a regime devoted to our destruction to acquire weapons that would enable them to make those plans a reality. Here's the good news. Number one, Israel is fully aware, as we're saying right now, across the ideological divide, there's agreement that Iran cannot develop the bomb. That's number one. Number two, look, the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Israel will be here for good. Israel's not going anywhere. Israel's enemies haven't got the memo, but God Almighty is very clear throughout His words. So take heart and be comforted, folks. Don't get upset about this, but you need to know. I think as believers, we need to be salt and light and bring this message to the world about what's going on and shake people out of their slumber and say, hey, this is happening, it's imminent, it's dangerous. Iran's not going to give up its nuclear weapons program, folks. There is no amount of bribery, and we can continue to send billions of dollars under the cover of night like the Obama administration did. It's not going to work. This is an ideologically, fanatical regime. They really believe this stuff. The things they say, death to America, death to Israel, bringing the Mahdi, the Islamic Messiah back to earth, all this apocalyptic rhetoric, they really mean it. And so we need to acknowledge that and know that this is happening. It's a serious thing. But again, Israel is prepared. The United States under President Trump has also said, we will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. That's a great thing, but you get the sense and you get the feeling that if Iran announced we have the bomb, we're there, we have a nuclear, you get the sense that many in Europe will kind of just shrug and say, well, we can live with them. We can contain them. They're not going to use it. Surely everything they say about destroying Israel and America and the West is just bluster for domestic consumption. We can trust them. They'll be a responsible actor in possession of nuclear weapons. Sad to say, but you can see that. You can see that response from many in Europe and at the UN and in the international bodies that, hey, okay, we didn't want them to go nuclear. It's unfortunate that they did. But now that they have the bomb, we can handle this. We've got this. They're not going to use it. They'll be responsible. Meanwhile, it will spark, they will use it, number one. Maybe not right away, but eventually they will because their ideology demands it. And if you don't understand the ideology, you cannot defeat the ideology. What's the first rule of war? Know your enemy. So number one, they will use it eventually. Number two, it will spark a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, the world's most volatile region. As soon as Iran would announce they have the bomb, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, everyone would be driving for the bomb. Do you really want to see that? Would you like to see a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, the world's most chaotic region, torn by war for centuries? I don't think we want to see that. So let's be on top of the Iranian regime here and increase the unrelenting pressure. I think President Trump's done a great job in that regard, turning up the heat, increasing sanctions. My message before we get into our next segment, keep the pressure on, don't let up. Okay, on to more positive news, I guess you would say. We all want to invest in Israel's future, right? As people who love Israel and love the Jewish people, we want to see the world's one and only Jewish state not only survive, but thrive. And the good news is Israel is doing just that. One reason for that is a great organization called Israel Bonds. Now, from time to time here on the Newscast, we like to highlight organizations that are doing great work and that are blessing Israel. We believe in that biblical mandate, Genesis 12:3, that God Almighty will bless those who bless Israel, and yes, He will curse those who curse Israel. Are you listening, Iranian regime? Well, Israel Bonds is blessing Israel. It's a great way to invest in Israel for believers and really for anyone who loves Israel and the Jewish people. I recently interviewed the president and CEO of Israel Bonds. His name is Israel Maimon, a great guy, about Israel Bonds and the work they are doing. I think you'll be interested in this, folks. Check it out. Take a look.
Well, Israel, thank you so much for joining us. It is great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, tell us a little bit more about Israel Bonds. What exactly does your organization do? What is your mission and what is your history?
So the state of Israel, as I'm sure all of you will see it, knows that Israel was established in 1948. And back then, Israel didn't have any resources. And there was a limit how much our first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, could ask for donations from the Jewish diaspora outside. So he thought, let's ask them to invest in Israel and then pay them back their money with interest. Back then, who dreamt that they will get their money back? They thought that they're going to give it as a donation, but this was his notion. Back then, institutions, financial institutions, didn't want to give any capital to the newborn state of Israel that was at risk. Who thought in 48, when we fight with all the Arab nations surrounding us, that we will be, thank God, still exist? So no one wanted to give us capital loans, and this is how Israel Bonds was established. Israel Bonds was the company that was selling the bonds of the government of Israel in order to secure the capital that Israel needed in order to build its infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, the water facilities, the electric facilities, every infrastructure that Israel built in those, I would say, 15, 20, 30 years in Israel, the new Jewish homeland was part because of Israel Bonds, selling bonds and getting loans from the diaspora, mainly in the United States, then in Canada, and now we are a worldwide organization.
Yeah, Israel, I was going to ask you in a second about your international presence, but hey, obviously, as you just laid out, an incredible impact on the founding of Israel, the early years, but today, you're still in the mix. Look, Israel, like every country really, has been affected by coronavirus. Tell us how Israel Bonds is making a difference there in Israel's fight against this pandemic.
So first, Israel Bonds, since it's already working for 70 years, we established great contacts, right? Great relations, first of all, with individuals that care about Israel. Of course, the Jewish people, but others, Christians from all over, and pastors that are doing events with us. So we have partnerships and relations with many individuals around the world. So now, when the pandemic erupted, we are able to approach them and to say, hey, Israel, like any other country, is facing huge, huge economic impact. We need additional capital in order to finance all the costs of health costs, security costs, unemployment costs, benefits costs, everything we need to have the capital that is needed. So Israel Bonds, with the Ministry of Finance, we decide that we are raising our annual goal because the state of Israel needs more capital, again, like any other states. But thank God, the infrastructure that we have built is allowing us to approach the people that are caring, not only institutions, and ask them, Israel needs us. Now, let's invest, and let's invest because it's a good investment, but also because we care about the future of the Holy Land.
Israel, what's great about what you're doing at Israel Bonds is you're blessing Israel in a tangible way. A lot of our viewers obviously want to fulfill that biblical mandate that we as Christians believe we have to bless Israel and the Jewish people. This seems like an easy way to do it. And don't let the word bonds scare you away, folks, because you don't have to work on Wall Street to invest in Israel Bonds, right? This is really simple for just the average person.
Yes, first of all, those who are blessing Israel are to be blessed, and they are blessed. So thank you very much. It's very easy. Israel Bonds, again, don't be fear from the word bonds or loan. This is your investment, but it's a personal connection. It's your personal connection to the Holy Land. You can buy $36, start with a $36 online, and you invest your small share in the state of Israel, in the Holy Land. And actually, this is what we do. If you look at the data of who is buying Israel Bonds, 90% of our purchasers are buying under $25,000, meaning that we have a vast people, vast data of Jewish people and Israel supporters that are buying Israel bonds, and through that they have their personal connection to the state of Israel. Now, every dollar counts, and you know it. Whether it's Warren Buffett, the biggest investor in the last century, that is owning Israel bonds. By the way, Warren Buffett, that became a great close friend of Israel bond, is having only two kinds of bonds in his portfolio because he's more of an equity guy. The Treasury bond of United States and Israel bonds. And what a great endorsement it is. So not only Jewish people, of course, people who are caring about developing, securing the Holy Land, this is one of the most viable but also easy way to connect yourself to the land of Israel.
Israel, how did you get involved in this? You have a very fascinating background, a very distinguished background in Israel. You're in New York now in your role for Israel Bonds. How did you get involved in this, and how did you come to Israel Bonds?
So my name is Israel. I'm from Israel, and I'm the CEO of Israel Bonds. So maybe this is how I came to this position. But seriously, I was the government secretary in Israel for 4.5 years. It's similar to the chief of staff in the White House. So I worked with two prime ministers, Ariel Sharon and Ehud Olmert. Today's prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was back then the minister of finance. And working with the politicians, working in the government, understanding the big picture, what are the needs of Israel, what are the challenges, security challenges, economic challenges, social challenges, brought me to this position that I'm able now to speak about the needs of Israel outside of Israel, and this is how I got it.
Israel, last question. You mentioned you're obviously in the United States, in Canada. Israel Bonds is international, right? That's number one. And number two, where can we find more about Israel Bonds? How can people get involved?
So Israel Bonds is operating in the United States. We have like 17 locations. Of course, they're working remotely now. We are operating in Brazil, in Mexico, Canada, and Europe. So we are selling Israel bonds all over. If you will go to www.israelbonds.com, you will find everything you need, from the rates, from what is Israel bonds, ways that you can buy Israel bonds. By the way, you can buy an Israel bond and give it as a gift to your church, to your community, to your charity of choice. So you do great two deeds. One, you invested in Israel. Second, you donate it to your charity of choice and you help your charity. Many people are donating to their colleges. So you can do it you can buy it as a gift for a wedding or for a celebration. So you do, again, two deeds. And this is the way. You can find all those in israelbonds.com or by calling your local office.
Israel, sounds great. Thank you so much for what you're doing. You're strong, just backing for the state of Israel. We really appreciate it, Israel. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much. And for all your community and you yourself, your family, keep safe and hope to see you all in Israel.
Thanks again to Israel Maimon and the entire team at Israel Bonds. They are doing very important work and you need to check them out. Hey, before we go, I just want to mention one more time and encourage you to subscribe to the news channel. Help us get to 100,000 and take this message far and wide for such a time as this. For Zion's sake, we will not keep silent now more than ever. Thanks for joining us today on the Newscast. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.